Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel FreeTuber Mind. In this video, we are going to see about 1. What is ego? Number 2. What is egoless state? Number 3. What is true happiness? And finally number 4. How to overcome ego. All these are from the various teachings of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharashi. Let's get back to the topic. First one, what is ego? The ego is simply wrong identity of the self with the non-self. As in the case of colorless crystal and its colored background. The crystal through colorless appears red because of its background. If the background is removed, the crystal shines in its original purity. Still again, the illustration is not quite appropriate, for the ego has its source from the self and is not like the background from the crystal. Having its source from the self, the ego must only be retraced in order that it might merge in its source. The sage experiences that he is the body, just as the ignorant person does. The difference is that the ignorant one believes that the self is confined to the body, whereas the sage knows that the body cannot remain apart from the self. The self is infinite for him and also includes the body. A jnani does not feel oppressed by his body. Did those jnanis who lived in bodies and wrote sacred books cease to be jnanis? The realized one do not think or plan for the future. They let the future take care of itself. For them, the future is in the present. A jnani crushes the ego at its source. It rises up again and again for him too. As for the ignorant, impelled by nature, that is prarabdha, both in the ignorant and in the jnani, the ego sprouts. But with this difference, foremost ego is quite ignorant of its source and is not aware of its deep sleep in the dream and waking stages. On the other hand, when the jnani's ego rises, he enjoys his transcendental experience with this ego, keeping his focus always on its source. His ego is not dangerous. It is only the ash skeleton of a burned rope. Although it possesses a form, it is ineffective. By constantly keeping our focus on our source, our ego is dissolved. Second topic, what is egoless state? The sage is often loosely described as one that knows the self, but it is not intended to be taken in a literal sense. It is a tentative description intended for those that believe ignorance to be something that exists. They are told that this ignorance is to be got rid of by winning the knowledge of the self. There are two misconceptions in this. One is that the self is an object of knowledge. The other is that the self is unknown and need to be known. The self being the sole reality, it cannot become an object of knowledge. Also, being the self, it is never unknown. The ancient lore tells us that it is neither known nor unknown, and the sage confirm it. How can this be? The self is pure. I am the only thing that is self manifest. By its light, all the world is lightened up, but it seems to be unknown and need to be known because it is obscured by the world and the ego. What is needed is to me remove these. The sage explains this by the analogy of a room that is encumbered with unwanted lumbers. If space be wanted, all that is needful is to be clear out the lumber. No face has to be brought in from outside. So too the ego mind and its creation has to be emptied out, and then the self alone would remain, shining without hindrance. What is loosely called the knowing the self is really being egoless and the self. Thus the sage does not know the self, he is the self. Number 3. What is true happiness? Identifying the self with the body in order to seek happiness is like trying to cross a river on the back of a crocodile. When the ego rises, the mind is separated from its source, the self, and is restless, like a stone thrown up into the air, or like the water of a river. When the stone or the river reaches its place of origin, the ground or the ocean, it comes to rest. So too the mind comes to rest and is happy when it returns to and rests in its source. As the stone and the river are sure to return to their starting places, so too the mind will inevitably at some time return to its source. Happiness is your own nature, hence it is not wrong to desire it. What is wrong is seeking it outside, because it is inside. Number 4. How to overcome ego. The ego can be overcome by following the methods of self-inquiry or complete surrender from the teachings of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharashi. And number 5. Conclusion. Just before waking up from sleep, there is a very brief state free from thought that should be made permanent. In dreamless sleep, there is no world, no ego, and no unhappiness, but the self remains. In the waking state, there are all of these, yet there is the self. Your nature is bliss. Find that on which all the rest are imposed, and you then remains as the pure self. In sleep, there is no space or time. They are concepts which arise after the I thought has arisen. You are beyond time and space. The I thought is limited I. The real I is unlimited, universal, beyond time and space. Just whilst rising from sleep and before seeing the objective world, there is a state of awareness which is your pure self that must be known. Having realized the self, nothing remains to be known, because it is perfect bliss. It is the all. Thank you.